A black Gemara. So we're learning so far that when two people convert, there's no relationship between the two of them. But we said that if they were conceived as a goy, but they were born as a yid, so we said that the fact that they have paternal relationship means nothing, because the father, was involved when they were conceived, and he was a goy then, and the goyim has no. His seed is not considered his, but as far as the mother is concerned, they're considered maternal brothers. And then we had an interesting discussion machlekes between Rab Sheshes and Rab Yaakov Aridei. Can two brothers who converted became Eden, can they, Rabban at least, marry each other's wives if one of them passes away? Rab Sheshes is not allowed to, and what do you call it? And Rabbi Yaakov says Ferish can. We had two versions of the Gemara. We said that if, for example, if it's only paternal brothers, nobody says that's us, because everyone knows there's no father, they're not related at all. They're arguing, and if it's maternal, everyone says even as goyim, two brothers are the same mother, then became Eden. With the Rabbanan, we treat them as if they're brothers, and they're not allowed to. The argument is if they're paternal and maternal. If it's paternal, do we only remember the paternal side and therefore they should be permitted, or do we also remember the maternal side and therefore they should be forbidden? The other version is even maternal brothers is forbidden, and one of them says Geisha's guy contrary. What's the problem? The other one says we're geyser because it looks like now they're Yidden and it doesn't look right. People might learn the wrong thing. Okay, that's the discussion we're having, and we're trying to bring proofs one way or another. So we're up to the top of the page. We're up to the Sadi Chesav and Aleph, about Gemara with 3 lines on the top of the page. Amar Rava comes along Rava and says, Hod Amar Rabban, this is what Rabban say, Ein of Mitzi, that there's no paternal side to a goy. Interesting expression using Mitzi. Like Tamer, don't say the reason is Mishum the Shtupi Bezima, we just simply don't know who the father is. That's why there's no paternal genealogy. Le'yadiyah, we don't know who the father is, because they're Mazana, they can have them, doesn't matter who she declares officially as a husband, it might have been somebody else. Abel Yadi, but if we know 100% that this is the father, Chayshin, then we'll say, yes, there is a paternal relationship by Goyim as well. If they were locked up in prison, for example, this man and this woman, then obviously couldn't have been anybody else. No. Even we know 100% biologically who the father is, halachically, it's not considered the father. Because we just had a case yesterday. Two brothers that were twins, identical twins. And the Gemara needs to say the tipa achas, they both came from the same sperm. And the sperms in a split, therefore you have twins. And so we definitely know who the father is. And yet Yet it says in the Sefer, now what? That they're not allowed to have any relations whatsoever. Because we don't, we see that what? We say that he doesn't exist at all. The Chsiv and why Taka doesn't exist. The reason is Besar Chamoidim. He says, Besar Chamoidim Bishram, Bezirma Susu Zirmasam. We treat their sperm as if it's hefker. There's no father whatsoever. They're not considered they're not considered a relation at all whatsoever. Because in this Bryce it says they're not liable for, there's no mitzvah of Yibum whatsoever because they're not related, even though we know for sure that's the father. I think the Rabbanan there should be nothing. So anyway, further Toshma coming here, Abiyasi said, we're continuing to explore this machlekes. Abiyasi said, Ma'isa ben Niftayim Ager, there was an incident with a person called Niftayim, a convert, Shenasa Eishes Achimima, he married his brother's wife, his maternal brother's wife. And what do you call it? And this instant came of Chamim before we said this machlekes Absheshis and Rabach Yaakov that can be, and yet he clearly did it. And this instant came for the rabbis. They told him, "Ein ishus leger." They said, "Ein ishus leger." There's no. The Gemara understood literally. There's no marriage when it comes to a convert. Says the Gemara, the Elager, the Kodesh Hanam. The Tosfos Tim for Ger marries any woman. There's no kedushin. Doesn't have to give gittin, but he's Jewish now. There's no prohibition when two brothers convert, there's no prohibition for one brother to marry his brother's wife after he dies. My love, what are we talking about here? The Nozba Akashugeh, they both converted, then they both got married. And we see that even with the Rabbanon, there's no relationship whatsoever, and they can marry each other's wives after the other person died. So the Gemara, no. The Nozba Kashu we're talking about a case here when the brothers married as goyim, and they married them. This is your brother's wife when he was a goy. And after he converted, he had no relations with this woman. This is not a Sheshach answer. After this, the brother who converted, he had no relations with this woman. And therefore, the brother can marry. That's why I hold in this case, he can marry. Says the Gemara, what's a chiddush? If they were married as goyim, and after he became Jewish, he no longer lived with her. So what's a chiddush he can marry? Of course he could. I would have thought, since I hold that once you convert two brothers, even though they're not technically related, if they marry Yiddish women, they're not allowed to marry each other's wives. So I would have thought, even as a goy, it would be goyzer as well. That far we don't go. That far we don't go. Says the Gemara. Another Ben Yasin said, when I went overseas, I found his convert. He married his brother's wife, his maternal brother's wife. Which rabbi permitted you to do that? He told me a story. Had a Isha, there was this woman, Beshiva and her 7 sons, and they all converted. Al Safsol Zed, he sat on this bench. Yoshua Kiva sat down as well, but Aman, he said, there was a woman and 7 children. Al Safsol Yoshua Kiva sat on this bench, but Aman, he said, 2 things he said. First of all, he said, Ger Noise Eishes Achim. First of all, he said that a Ger can definitely marry his brother's wife, his maternal brother's wife. And then a second thing that he said was, it says in the Pasuk that these are the words of Yoina for the second time that he said to the people in the day. So we learn from there, Shein is Dibra Yoni spoke a second time, that was the last conversation Hashem had with Yoina. We take it literally. Bottom line, Tonimi is Ger Noisi Eishes Achim. Clearly, Rabbi Kiva said a Ger can marry his brother's wife, and the Passion talking about his brother after he became Jewish. My love, the Nozbach Ger. Your brother married this woman after he converted, he was Jewish, and yet we say that even though halachically you're not really brothers, but we don't want Yidden making a mistake to get allowed to, so we're not going to allow it either. Sort of Sheshel answer the same thing. Well, no.
Sorry, can I interrupt for a sec? I'm sorry to bother you. Just I lost the track of what's that quote about Yonah got to do?
Nothing. Rabbi Kiva said 2 things, 2 disparate things, staying on this bench.
Oh, he just had to say that.
There's no link between the 2.
All right.
We'll come back to you in a minute. Then we'll learn now. The Nazbe again, that the brother married her when he was a goy, and when he converted, he had nothing to do with her. So Maila member, of course, you're allowed to marry her. She was a goy at the time, and now she converted, and then nothing to do with your brother, so it's a problem. They would have thought we should not allow, even though they were living together as a goy, not as a yid. Because next time when he's a yid, and we'll think you're allowed to, and then we're worried that Yisro will do the same thing as Usher as well. It's Kamashlan that we're not going to be Geisa. I mean, the truth of the matter is, it's like a Gzeda. Of course, it shouldn't be Geisa. Well, maybe we thought it was all part of the same Gzeda. Says the Gemara, a side issue. And how can you believe this person? He was challenged. Who gave you permission to marry? And tells a story about Rabbi Kiva. Is he then believed in? We learned previously. Kol tell me, Chacham Shemoid Allah. Anytime a Chacham who passes dinin. And then Uba, and then it comes along. So the question is, do we believe it or not? If he stopped, learned this halach, and then an incident happened a while later, and he relates back to that original psak he gave. Of course you listen. But if only after the event he comes along with this halach and shayim, we don't listen to him. So over here also he was challenged afterwards. He's already married to this his brother's wife. He said, how can you do that? Today's already before explained. It's the only time we don't trust them is if they have a vested interest. They're in the gay of it. Here he's talking about himself. If you ask a Rav Shaila after an event, of course you're allowed to. Of course the Rav can pass him. Talking about if the Rav is passing about himself. It's only if he once upon a time said this halacha. The moment that he's in the gay bedover, you have to discount what he says. So Gemara will give a couple answers. This ger was telling everybody this story about Rabbi Akiva even before he was challenged. Or another version is Mishum de Ka'amad Hari Isha Shiva Bana. He's telling you a story that this happened a while ago. This happened a while ago. Number three, he also told the thing about Yaina. And since we believe him when it comes to the medrash about Yaina, we'll also believe like a migui on this thing he said as well. So let's talk about Yaina. We learned. This is the words of Hashem to Yaina. We're not 100% sure when exactly Yaina lived. This whole story of Yaina during his era that he lived. Lema the following. Shani I only spoke to him twice, not a third time. What do you mean? We'll see if there's a pasuk where it says Tanakh regarding Yeravam ben Yoyash, who Heshiv as Gvul Yisrael, that he brought back the boundaries of the Yidden, Melabei Hamas, from the place called Melabei Hamas, Ad Yom Rava, Kidvar Hashem, like the words of Hashem, Lekei Yisrael, Hashadibi B'Yadav the Yoina ben Amitai. Hashem spoken through Yoina ben Amitai Navi. Clearly, it seems Yoina lived in the time of Yeravam ben Yeshua, and Yoina continued prophecy. So one version of the Gemara is Rabbeinu Alis Kinin B'Kava. Yeah, of course, Yoina lived at that time of Yeravam ben Yoyash, and he continued prophesying. And when we say that Hashem spoke to him only twice, is regarding Nineveh. Nachman Bayichra says, Hochikama. This is what he meant. The pasuk meant, not that Yoina lived at that time. Just like once upon a time, Abraham spoke to Yoina, and what happened was he was able to Nineveh. They all did tshuva, and Yoina was so effective. So to the time of Rav ben Yoyash, he was able to bring everyone to do tshuva, just like Yoina did in his era, but not that Yoina was involved there. What is interesting is that we read on Yom Kippur the whole story of Yoina and Nineveh, how they all did tshuva. But there's another nach where they actually all relapsed and they all became bad again. That part we leave out of Yoina and it goes into another one of the Treyasa. Toshma, come in here. Ger, we're going back to our original discussion of Sheish Rabach v'Yakov. Ger shahayim leidasa b'kedusha b'hayrasa shalai b'kedusha. Again, that he was born as a Yid, but he was conceived while he was a guy. So we said before, there's no paternal lineage here, no relationships, but there is maternal. Yesh le'she'erein, he has relations on his mother's side, but be'ein le'she'erein, he has no relations on his father's side. He has no father, because his father's involvement was when he was a guy, but his mother gave birth to him as a Yid. So therefore, he's a Yid. So, and any future siblings are his siblings. Ketzad, for example, if he marries a sister on his mother's side, Yaitzi, he has to leave that marriage. But in other words, she was born as a Yid. Then it's Osam HaTorah. He had an older sister who was born as a goy. He was conceived as a goy and born as a Yid. So technically, they're not siblings, right? Because she was Megayer, they're not related at all. But we are worried that if we are going to allow him to marry his older sister, he will think that he can marry his younger sister. His younger sister is actually a full-fledged Yid, and they're Asar Karas, because he's considered a Yid. He was born a Yid. And therefore, his sister, who was conceived as a Yid and born as a Yid, is Mamish's sister, meaning Sakaris. And he wants to understand the nuance, the difference between an older sister and a younger sister. So therefore, we decided to ban that. That's how Rashi takes the argument. That's how Rashi learns. So the meaning of what happens, let's say it's a paternal sister, Yekayim. He can live with his sister who's a Goy, and it was Megayah. And he was conceived as a goy and born as a Yid, he can live with her because everyone knows that it's from the father and they're not related at all. And let's say, And let's say the father then marries somebody else and has more kids, and he marries them. It's not a problem because they're not his siblings. What about Achoisa of Minaim, the sister of his father? In other words, his aunt. Maternal one is also Yaitzi, again, because since it's a sister, a maternal. If we ask your father's sister, maternal sister, because next time your own maternal sister. So we're expanding the Easter of maternal sister. But mina of, if it's your father's sister, your aunt, it's only a paternal relationship, you can't, because even your own sister, if it's a paternal relationship, you're allowed. Your mother's sister, maternal sister, again, you see, because like otherwise your own maternal sister, and then if it's a Yidwood problem. And what about if it's your mother's paternal sister? The thing is, on the one hand, it's paternal, so it should be permitted. On the other hand, it's your mother and sister. So the mayor says, Yaitzi, it's too close. It resembles too much your own sister, and therefore you have to divorce her. And the Chum say Yekaya. So the mayor said, call erva, any erva. Shehi mishum er. The mayor says, why do you have to divorce her? Because any erva, you have to say, you leave her, any erva that has to do with relations or aim, anything has to do with the mother, you should, we're goizer, and we include in that umbrella, and therefore you should exit. But anything to do with the father, you can't. That's a mayor. On the other hand, you're permitted the Ashes Achiv, but your brother's wife, even if it's your maternal brother, but it's his wife, is permitted to you. In other words, your brother was born when he was a goy. You were conceived as a goy, but born as a yid. His wife is permitted to you. And we weren't goyzer, but maybe next time, just like you were worried about a sister, but a younger sister, weren't you worried about a younger brother's wife? You're gonna think you're allowed to marry. Why not? Because when did we make the Gzeda if it's a biological relationship, not if it's a relationship through marriage? Brother's wife is not biologically usher to you. It's the wife is usher to you through marriage, and that father, therefore, we're going goyzer. So therefore, we say even though that this brother is maternal brother, and he is Megaya, he was a goy, he was born, and now he's Megaya. You're allowed to marry his wife. Same thing is with Eishes Achei Avi, the same thing is the wife of your father's brother, again, because it's not biological, you said it's through marriage. Vishal kol arayis mutaris, and all other arayis are permitted to him. In what way? La suye, to include Eishes of the wife of your father. They were going and then they got married. They became a guy. Again, all of these are not biological. So the ones that we asked were biological. Your sister, your mother's sister, your father's sister, maternal. But these, anything that comes through a marriage, that far we're not going to make a gzeda. That since you're halachically allowed to, then maybe you'll think that even as you're allowed. We're not going to go that far. What about nasi should be? You married a woman and a daughter. I'm learning for you're not allowed to marry a woman and a daughter. So what you do is, and you marry them when they were going. And we're talking about that you married them when you were going, they were going, and you all converted together. So now, what do you do now? Technically, you're allowed to live with both of them because there's no longer any immigration guy catching them. But again, we don't want the way Rashi learns the whole Gemara is we're scared that as a Yid, what we'll do in the Gemara Sanhedrin and some Rishonim here learn that the thing is we don't want people to say, as a goy you couldn't do this, and as a yid you can. You went from a kedusha chamura, a goy, to a kedusha kala yid. It's all the way around. So therefore, we're a bit cautious. It says here, so kohen is achas. You choose which one you're going to live with, and one of them you can't. Why? Because otherwise, you'll think by yid also you can live with a mother and a daughter. They said, but from the outset you shouldn't marry. Now, if we just told you that you're not allowed to live with both of them, you have to leave and let one of them go. So of course you're not allowed to marry both of them. What are we even saying? You want to explain. If this person's wife died, is allowed with his mother. If you remember, we had an argument that was before, but Ayid, if you're allowed to, because as hen, how do we learn as hen? According to how to understand Rabbi Akiva, but according to one opinion, Rabbi Shmuel, even after the wife died, you're not allowed to live with your mother-in-law. According to Rabbi Akiva, one of you in Rabbi Akiva, if your wife died, you're allowed to live with your mother-in-law. But here we're saying, we'll come back to that. Here we're saying we have a machlekes. If a person was married to his wife and they converted together, he's allowed to now live with the mother-in-law. Because we're not going to make a gzeda that far. Remember, they're all going, you're not really related anyway. So if the wife died already, we allow you to marry a mother-in-law. He could have Tani also, he's not allowed to. Tani Miyas, and now we're going back to our original question to Rav Sheisha, Mutter be'eishes achi, says it clearly you're allowed to live with your brother's wife. Clearly, it says you're allowed to live with your brother's wife because it's not biological; it's through marriage. A question on Avsheshis. My love, the Nozbach is we're talking about a case where your brother, after he converted, married this woman, and because since technically it's not your brother, it's not through marriage, therefore you're allowed to live after he dies, you're allowed to live with his wife. So we're like, no. The Nozbach, let me answer till now. Always talking about that they married when they were goyim and they did not live together after they became Jews. I was a member of the Chiddush. Same thing as I said before. We would have thought you should be goyzer while they were goy. That we're not going to go that far. If they live together only as a goy, don't worry about it. You said before, Nasi should be to marry a woman, a daughter. One of them you have to step away from. And then you say the doesn't make sense. You tell me you have to exit the marriage. The tell me the don't do that. The Gemara says, this is how we're reading it. This is how you should learn. All those cases Rabbanan said, all the cases we said, look, your paternal sisters, all right, and all that kind of stuff. Even so, the Chatchila you should do it. So it's saying if it happened, don't worry about it. Mesa Ishta, then we learned if your wife died, this guy's wife died, is permitted in the mother-in-law. Also the Chamais is forbidden. What's going on here? Chodek Rabbi Shmuel, the Chodek Rabbi Kiva. One view follows Rabbi Shmuel, who says that even a Yiddish woman cannot live with a mother-in-law, and one follows Rabbi Kiva, who says a Yiddish woman could live with a mother-in-law. The one says, a ger cannot, is Rabbi Shmuel, the Osa Bechamay Shalacham, that even after the person's wife died, live with your mother-in-law, be Surakaim, so the Issa remains. The Gabi ger goes with abundance, so therefore, by ger also, we forbade it. Uman the Shodi, the one who permits it, Rabbi Kiva, Dama Chamay Shalach Misa, Kolosh Leisur. Rabbi Kiva holds that even that by Yid, once the wife died, he's allowed to marry the mother-in-law. Then Gabi ger goes with abundance, by ger wouldn't go. Okay, now starts the next incident where, interesting case, with all these interesting scenarios, a case where all the children got mixed up, and we don't know who's the Yavam and who isn't. What happened in here, we learned is there were 5 women, each one had a normal son, they knew exactly who the son was, then they all gave birth and they were hiding in this cave, and now the children got mixed up. And all these 5 got married to women, and all these 5 children who mixed up all died. And now the 5 remaining brothers, each one of them has a mitzvah to be meyabim, one of the girls, or to give chalisa, but they don't know who's their sister and who isn't. And if it's not your sister, you give the chalitza, it's useless. It has to be the right brother to give chalitza. So what do we do? So this is what we do. Chomesh Noshim, 5 women. In a second, I'll tell you a beautiful area. I think I told you this last time, but I'll tell you again. Chomesh Noshim, 5 women, Shinis Arba were the same. The children got mixed up, they were hiding in a cave. So each one has a definite son, and each one has now a suffix daughter. Sorry, they had 5 sons. The other way around. I told you wrong. They had 5 sons in this cave, and they were, we're not sure whose son is who. And then they had 5 Vadai sons. And what happened was that the 5 Vadai sons all died. So we know who the wives were, but we don't know who is the brother-in-law to give them the chalitza of the Yibum. So what happens? So Chomesh Noshim every woman should have to get a chalitza from every single guy. Can't have a Yibum from every single guy. Only marry one. You can have a chalitza from every single guy. But what should you do here? So Chomesh Noshim will say, and the kid got mixed up. And then they grew at Teruvas with Noshim. So what happened was all of these kids, all these Suffolk kids, married the Mason, and all died. Okay, tragically, all died. So this is what you do. First, let's go to each girl. So we go, let's say, to the oldest woman, and the 4 doubtfuls give chalitza. So, and then the 5th one marries her. So Manashach, if the 5th one is not really the brother, so she would have received chalitza from the real one, whoever it is, and he's marrying a strange woman. Nothing wrong with that. And if he happens to be the brother, nachbesen, he's doing a mitzvah. Okay, so we took care of girl number 1. Now we go to the second woman. Who he cannot marry the second one. Instead, what we do is he gives chalitza, and 3 others give chalitza to the second woman, and echad meyabim. Now, why he can't, we'll see in a minute, or why we don't encourage that. The echad meyabim, and another one goes ahead and marries her. Nimtzu comes out, and then we keep on going there. And then the third one, the two who marry give chalitza plus two others, and then the fifth one goes and marries her. So each one gets married by one and gets chalitza from all the others. So they're all right. Nimtzu arba chalitzas v'yibn l'chol achad v'achad. Each one of the women received three chalitzas and four chalitzas and one yibn. Tries the Gemara. But the order has to be mechler. First you give chalitza, v'hoda yibum, and then yibum. Why is that? Because if you marry her first, what happens if you're not the rightful brother and she is not allowed to marry a stranger? So you're committing a sin. So therefore, you can't have them marry first. Because you're meeting a yivam in the market. So we ask a question. So he and the three others, let's say it comes to the second woman, the one who married the first one joins three others, gives a chalitza, and so on. Now, what's the mission trying to tell you? The leitema, don't say, you would think, let one of them marry all five, and then definitely doing a mitzvah. It's better, we want each brother to marry another woman, and hopefully we're doing a couple of mitzvahs here. And Nachbes, it's a possibility all five got the right one, and all five did the right mitzvah. Maybe that everything is a Chomer Shemayim, so maybe they will make sure that they all find the right one. So we learn a very interesting thing here from the Gemara. If you have a chance to do 100% of mitzvah, but all you can do is one mitzvah, or there's a suffix you could do five, and it could be you'll do none, better do the suffix five than the vadai one. Which is an interesting thing here. Because if one guy marries all five women, he's definitely did a mitzvah of Yibum, HaTorah. If you're going to say all five marry a woman, it could be that none of them did a mitzvah. Could be all married the wrong woman. Could be all of them did a mitzvah. So it seems clear from the Gemara here that a suffix to do more mitzvahs is more preferable than definitely doing at least one mitzvah. This is counterintuitive, as you can say. The Meiri says an interesting thing here. The Meiri says, I'm going to paraphrase the Meiri. I'm going to add a little bit to it. In the story of Shlomo HaMelech, with the two women, they were hiding in the cave, and then they both had little babies, and one of them died, and the other was just one surviving child, and each one claimed it's mine. Shlomo HaMelech said, this is his first court case. And Shlomo HaMelech said, let's divide it in half. And one woman said, yep, good idea. And the other one said, let her have it. And Shlomo HaMelech said, that's the real mother. You have to question what happened there. I mean, this woman claimed that the child is mine, and when Shlomo said, let's cut in half, she's happy to do that. Why? I mean, was she crazy? If she claimed that this child is my child, why would she be happy that the child's cut in half? It doesn't make sense, the story. And we're not talking about a crazy person here. So what's going on here? Now, me doesn't ask that question. I'm just paraphrasing the meeting. So the meeting says a brilliant thing. Remember this. The meeting said the story of Shlomo Melech is not the way it seems, superficially. The story was there was a mother and a daughter. They both had a child, and this mother they both had a child. And one of the children died straight away. If it was the daughter's child who died straight away, she is now a Yevama, because she has a brother-in-law. That other baby was her mother-in-law's baby. It was a mother-in-law and a daughter. It was a mother-in-law's baby. She now has to wait 13 years. She has to wait till this kid grows up. Her life is messed up. So therefore, she claimed that this kid is mine, even though she had no interest in raising this kid. She's not interested in the kid at all. She just said it's mine in order to avoid becoming a Yevama. Therefore, she's out of it. The mother-in-law said, no, it's mine, and therefore you're a Yevama. That was a discussion here. And when Shlomo HaMelech gave her a way out, that she said, look, we'll take care of this baby, and therefore you're no longer a Yevama. She was more than happy she was thrilled, because she had no interest in raising the child. It wasn't her child. She knew that. Her only vested interest was to avoid being a Yevama. And by Shlomo HaMelech's solution, it's even better than hers. No kid anymore. No worries. That's what the whole story is all about. That's how the Meiri learns on this Gemara here. Ooh. Amazing interpretation, which gives it a lot of explanation. And then there's more to it, but that's the gist. Okay. Says Gemara further. The Gemara says, Mikzosan achin mikzosan she. So turn about we learned. Mikzosan achin umikzosan she'ein achim. This is what the Bride says, very cryptic. If some are brothers and some are not brothers, achin cholzin, the brothers give chalitza, ushe'ein achim miyamin, and the non-brothers, they are miyabin. What's going on here? My comma. What's going on here? What happened there? Mitzasa na'achin. This is still continuation of the case of those 5 boys that were all mixed up and they got married and then they all died. But the 5 surviving definite brothers, some are brothers paternally and some are brothers maternally. Now remember, the din of Yibam only applies to the paternal brothers, not to the maternal brothers. In fact, they have an issa to go ahead and to live with their brother's wife. So, for example, when Ashkelon has 2 brothers that are paternal, and has 1 maternal brother. So let's say the 3 brothers. 2 are paternal and 1 is maternal. So what do we do? So he says as follows. The brothers from the mother, they give chalitza, and obviously he can't marry anybody because it's the brother's wife. But he gives chalitza because he does have a paternal brother, but he doesn't know which one is his paternal brother because they're all mixed up. So he gives chalitza to everybody. He cannot marry anybody because could be he's going to be marrying the wife of his maternal brother. He has a maternal brother and a paternal brother, but because he has a maternal brother, he cannot marry any of them. He cannot do the yibum. Even though Mishnah said they all should do, but not in this case, because it could be that it's his maternal brother's wife that he's marrying, and that's us Isakaris. So he has no choice but to give chalitza to everybody. But the only ones who do the yibum, remember we said in the Mishnah that one of them does the yibum for each one, for each woman. That's only the paternal brothers. What about Miktsas and Kohanim, Miktsas and Kohanim? Some are Kohanim and Kohanim. The brother who's a Kohen, the Vade brother Kohen, cannot marry the woman because each woman is receiving a chalitza. And remember, a Kohen cannot marry a chalutza. So even though somebody rabban, but he can't. Therefore, he can only give chalitzas. Kohanim chotzin, she'en kohen miyabin. Anyone who's a Kohen, they cannot marry any of these women because since every one of these women are getting a chalitza, even though it's a suffix chalitza because the only one of them is a real brother, but we don't know which one is what. Therefore, the Kohen cannot marry, only give chalitza. Miktsas and Kohanim, Miktsas and achmeneim. What about some of them are Kohanim, the rest are brothers, maternal brothers, which means that nobody can marry. Nobody can marry, they just give chalitza. Just quickly go. Okay, should we stop here?